morning, have each of the panelists introduce themselves and where they're from and their role, and then all of you introduce yourselves so that the panelists know who you are and where you're from, okay, and what you do. So I'm Carol Barda, and I am with the North Central Kansas Library System. I'm the assistant director there.
I'm Stephen Johnson. I'm the state representative from Assyria for part of the Central Kansas area.
Kimball Francis, I'm the city administrator in Great Bend.
My name is Bob Gale. I'm the mayor of a little town called Florence.
I'm Grace Castens. I'm the director of the Advocacy Library in far northwest St. Lawrence.
I'm Shay Crowley, and I'm director at Williamsburg Community Library.
And
Northeast, sorry.
I'm Colleen Kilby. I'm from Stanton County, all the way out on the Colorado line. And actually, I live in Colorado. I'm south of the Kansas Library System.
Brady Shaker from Lee Community Library. Juniper is Winchester and in the Northeast.
Jessica Isel, Laurel Public Library in Hiawatha, Northeast Kansas.
Jessica Collins in Southwest Kansas Library System, Plains Community Library.
Susie Boschman, Fairview Township Library in Satana, Kansas. I'm with the Southwest Kansas Library.
Stephanie McAdam with Southeast Kansas Library System in Cedar Valley.
Samantha Graydon from Parsons Public Library, and I'm with the Southeast Kansas Library System.
And I'm Margie Shepard. I'm a consultant with the Central Kansas Library System out of Great Bend.
I'm Robin Hastings. I'm the library consultant for Northeast Kansas Library System.
I'm Megan Zampieri. I'm the Assistant Director of Northwest Kansas Library System. I'm in Norton.
I'm Dwayne Meyer. I'm the technology consultant for North Central Kansas Libraries.
I'm Nikita Hirsch. I'm from Hope, the Hope Community Library Director of North Central.
I'm Sandy Wilkerson, and I'm the youth consultant at Southeast Kansas Library System.
Good afternoon. My name is Patty Collins, and I'm the youth consultant for the Central Kansas Library System.
I'm Christy Snyder, and I'm with Central Kansas Library System as their school library consultant.
Kim Ryder, Southeast Kansas Library System consultant.
Kathy Young, Talking Books Consultant, ILO for Central Kansas Library System, Great Bend.
Andy Mitchner, IT manager for CKLS.
Richard Brookman, consultant to Southwest Kansas Library System.
So now you know a little bit about who you're speaking to. And we gave out some questions before everyone arrived today, so that we have a little chance to think about some of these. But if you all have questions, if something comes up, be sure that you ask your question, because that's what we're here for today. So we'll start with this one. Each of you represent a different level of government and different roles of decision making. What kind of information do you need to hear from your libraries? And everything from, I'm going to give you some examples. So financial reports, statistics, newsletters. What is it that you need in order to make the decisions at your level of government? And any of
I guess I'll kick it off. And I guess that depends on a little bit whether it's a city library, as that's my charge. I already know Richard. He and I were in Lakin together, but the library was through the county. So maybe the information that I would need from him would be different than the library when I was in Coffeyville, and I see some man person. So I was down in that. But budgets are always important. We want to see budgets to actual. I mean, that's my preference. But as you're probably already aware, we don't have really any say in the library budget, so to speak. It comes as a pass-through unless the city has decided to put in an ordinance that would cap the mills or something like that. But I don't have any experience in that regard. So, but it's always nice to be able to talk to that, because people don't quite understand the relationship usually between libraries in the city, you have your own boards that govern what happens, but because it's the city library, then obviously the city administrator or the city manager must know what's going on, or must be the one that has to answer those questions.
I think so.
There's an icebreaker.
Thought I was going to be strangled there for a minute.
So budgets are always nice, and we like to be able to field questions when we can, and Gail is aware of, I hadn't been in town 2 days and we had budget issues that we were having to deal with. But that's where it's nice, where I can have an understanding of that, and together we can work through issues and citizens' concerns and things like that. But also, I like to know the usage levels. I like to know what programs are going on. Some of the things that, if it's a city-owned facility, I'd kind of like to have a strategic plan for the facility itself, because whether it's right or not, we don't usually are not our focus. Buildings aren't, so I need to be made aware of what those issues could be or may be in the future, and what kind of plans do we need to be looking at to address it. I think that, for me, that's the main things.
Well, I'm kind of in a unique position, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later. I'd like to talk about, because as mayor, we're a very small city of about 425 people, give or take. Our city is kind of unique in that the library board owns the building. The building was donated from a gas company some years ago to the library board. They just bypassed the city. There was a lot of friction, a lot of warring going on between the city over control of the building, and the library board saying, no, keep your hands off, all this kind of thing. And it culminated in about 2002 or 2004, I forget which, when Eric Smith of the League of Municipalities drafted that really crappy language on how to control rogue library boards. And so basically you set up a charter ordinance that caps the mill levy as to what the support of the library is. Now, in talking to Eric more recently about this particular problem, it was never intended, from him, to be a thumb to squeeze the life out of the library, but there's always unintended consequences, and when you get people in government sometimes that have other ideas, things can get out of hand. Once a charter ordinance is put in place, it's a difficult thing to get undone. So anyway, as far as what this particular, like I said, we'll get into a little bit more of that later, because I would like to, I guess, give you all a warning in that regard. But as far as what kind of things that I would require or would like to have, here again, I'm kind of in another perspective, as I was a library board member before I became mayor, so I understand how both sides of it work. And I don't go to every meeting every month, but I probably go to every other meeting. And getting so I understand the financial reports, and I understand the statistics, or I get to know a lot about that. And I'm very passionate about our library system, because I feel like it's very, very important for the kids. We're kind of like I say, a very small community. I think our median age of the last census was 49 years old. And I'm sure it's well over that by now. We don't have a school system anymore in town. It's more a unified system. And the town is probably financially below average for income potential and what have you. So I feel like we have a higher density of at-risk kids in that regard. They're not getting, or I shouldn't say they're not getting, but their ability to get extra help in school and things, because they have to get on the bus, come back home, is more limited. So I feel like the library is very important in that regard. So as far as mayor, I guess the would be, all these things as are listed here are all wonderful. But like I said, I have kind of a different perspective than a lot of people probably would because of all of the animosity, all the connections, and the fact that I was a library board member before, after, the size of the community, and all this sort of thing. But so I don't know that I could add a whole lot to this particular question other than that knowing what's going on down there is helpful. Your relationship with your mayor or your city administrator, or anybody having friends on your city councils or commissions or how you're structured is very important because I can definitely tell you what it's like to have a library board that's at war with the city council because you get people dug in on both sides of the issue, and I guarantee you the library's not going to win. And so, and in the process, that's just bad for the community. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, having a good relationship with your mayor, if you could develop that, keep that, protect that as best you can.
So do you get a board packet every month?
Yeah.
So at the state, so this is, you're kind of one step removed from all of this. These guys are both right there in the trenches. What is it that you need to hear from the library? What kind of information is best for you?
So, and I'll try and be specific to me in general. So I work with a lot of financial issues, so that's the area that I would tend to communicate more on. And if there are policy issues, that would be a blind side that I have. So exactly how to best communicate those, I might be weaker on. On the nuts and bolts of the finance piece, what's really useful is pretty simple. What's working and what's not. Okay? And on what's working, what are the things we either need to keep doing or need to do so that it keeps working, right? Is there a budget item? Is there something that needs to continue to happen? And what's not working, what do we need to consider to be able to make it work? And then what would we expect as results from doing that? If we get all the way there, now rarely do I get all of that information, right? But the more you have, the more likely you would be successful in getting that all the way through. So that's kind of the annual big deal thing is, okay, what's working, what's not, what do we need, and how might that interact with other issues. And we're all just working on whatever piece it is. How do we stay out of the way of the local entities, which we've not been very good at. Anyway, then on the specific thing, there's kind of the triage piece of there's a bill, right? And on that, this could be offense or defense, right?
That's
There's one we want to create, there's one we really don't want. And that would be, what is the topic? Ideally, what committee is that going to? And who are some of the key people? Are we behind this trying to make this work? Are we trying to find how do I get to the reason for as well as the unintended implications of that bill as quickly as possible? So, and that one is just as needed. So if it's offense from you, then that's great. If it's defense, hopefully it's not very often for you. Anyway, I think how to reach us is a different question, so we'll keep talking.
I might piggyback on
Okay, go ahead.
you said that, especially when you're talking about a bill that either you're trying to combat or trying to have passed, your city administrator, city manager is going to be a good advocate. We're typically actively engaged. Bob talked about the League of Municipalities. That's most cities, not all, but most cities and counties are a member, and they're an advocacy group for municipalities. I personally have sat on the board of the governing body for the league and do a lot of lobbying for our interests, and so you want to make certain, that's something that I would add to the piece too. If you're trying to communicate things on the state level, there are a lot of other advocates that have ears to senators and representatives, so that you need to avail yourself of that as well.
Bob mentioned the charter ordinances, and back in the 90s, the state legislature had actually put a a cap on the library mills at 2 mills. About that. Many cities did a charter ordinance to increase that mill levy. And so we're now at the point where a number of cities have mill levies of 6 or 8. Those were typically where they went to with those. And in 1998, 1999, that was a pretty good increase, and most libraries could go into that. And now, in the last few years, with declining assessed valuation and increasing costs, that those mill caps are getting pretty tough. And it is very hard, you're right, it's very hard to change those once you've got them in there. And so the original idea was to give libraries more money, and now it's kind of holding us back on that. But I just wanted some people, because I know not everybody's aware of that, of the history of how those started to come about.
I guess what I would like to add to that is that's why it's so important for the smaller, all communities, but particularly the smaller ones, to be involved with City Hall, your city managers, your mayor, whatever, to be aware. You know, if there's some talk about going towards some sort of charter ordinance or something like that's going to affect you, because it can have a very dramatic effect. And while it might be tolerable or something that's workable now, you need to be looking at what are the consequences down the road, 10, 15, or 20 years. It's like in our particular case, you know, we own the building, the library board owns the building, and so the city's like, well, okay, it's your building, you take care of, if you've got a roof leak, you've got a sidewalk problem, you've got whatever, it's your problem. Somebody throws a brick through your window, it's $1,000, you've got to come up with the money. Well, the 6 mills that we're capped at, it's barely enough to keep the lights on, pay our minimum wage librarian or director a minimum amount of hours a week. What is it, 13, I think she's at? 13 hours a week. And we can do that up until about, what, middle October, and we're out of money. And so the library board's selling hot dogs and soup suppers and everything else to come up with money just to keep the lights on and keep the librarian in there. Well, that's not right. And but here again, when you get people loggerheads with one another and they get that thing in place, it's you got to take a look at the power structure of your city. If you've got some pretty hard-headed characters that are in there that are pretty strong and getting reelected over and over again, you may be stuck with it for a long time. That's a problem. We're just now, after nearly 20 years, in a position where we might be able to get something done.
And I was just gonna chime in, and I'm not from Kansas, but one thing I hear over and over again is that small cities have long memories.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah, just because like in our particular case, we have 2 council members that were on there for about 20 years each, and they just retired this last. Well, that doesn't mean they go away. Oh no, no. They got their fingers and everything, and their power continues on until, I presume, until they drop dead. I don't know, but yeah. So and that's their legacy. You know, they put that in place, and they're going to fight you tooth and nail to protect it. So.
And now they have more time to make it.
Oh, absolutely.
Frequently, it happens that the library board or the director goes to the budget hearing or the budget work meeting every year. Or we come to the Capitol every year to talk to our representatives. Is that one time a year enough, or how often do you really want to hear about what's going on in the libraries?
Back to me, formally, annually, and maybe biannually, if you want to give the state of the library report. I think that's important, but informally, you're an extension of the city, and I'd like to hear from you, much more frequently than that. And again, it depends on what the dynamic is. And I've only been in Great Bend 2 months, so Gail and I don't have a close working relationship now, but I can tell you when I was in Coffeyville, The library director and I would say we're friends, and we were, you know, we had the comfort level to be able to text each other with a question, or I need help, or I need this. So that's, I would see that, you know, I develop that same kind of relationship with any department head that I have that's directly under the city. So, you know, those personally is just how I.
As far as I'm concerned, especially given my background, the size of our city, I don't think it's harmful to have somebody at a council meeting once a month with a report, because it reiterates the fact, hey, we're short, we're getting towards October, we're running out of money. They need to hear that over and over and over again, because with everything else that's going on in cities, libraries oftentimes get pushed down, forgotten about, swept under the rug. And so it's not like you need to be there being antagonistic or anything like that, but just be persistent with the information, and so that they're aware of what's going on. I think it's more difficult for people to turn a blind eye or something like that if you keep putting it in their face. That generally people want to do the right thing, so it's as far as I'm concerned, like he was saying, formally once or twice a year, maybe quarterly, but I would think that in my particular case, having somebody with a kind of a general report once a month would be helpful.
Especially sort of those library statistics and things like that too.
Absolutely.
And then you actually have a great plan. The legislative session for Kansas just is January through March officially, with a veto session in May. That sometimes is short and sometimes it's not. But right at the beginning of that session is the best time for the budget financial stuff to get worked into that. So that really would be annual. And then if there's an issue that comes up, that's the ad hoc one, and I don't think you can communicate too much when that happens. So just go past the point that you think that you're being a pain, and you're probably starting to get too effective on communicating at that point. Because that you really have to hammer through at that point in time.
We have had some pushback over the years when we have a pretty good network of library friends and things like that, and we've had bills come up and we've told people, contact your representative, contact your senator, and we'll get a message from them. Okay, I've gotten 1,000 emails. Please tell them to stop. You know,
It's okay. But that's what gets noticed.
Right.
Right.
And you know, my kind of reaction was, well, you want it to be a representative of people, so you have to put up with hearing from them once in a while. But I think that what I'm hearing all of you say is that timely information is important, and making sure that the city, the council, that everyone has the decision-making information in hand is really imperative for when you're working on other things. So frequently we hear that.
I have a question. I'm working on developing a better relationship with my city, my commission, and my city manager and my city mayor. And I send out weekly emails to them, just inviting them to come to the library or check out our website. And I never received anything back, but I have had the mayor and a couple commissioners in the library. What are you expecting as far as, is that good enough, or do we have to be present more? I mean, balance, because I feel like I'm not receiving much back from them, but they know who I am, which makes me very happy.
Yeah.
But which one would you recommend us doing more? Being present or just sending them an email?
I recommend being present. It's at least one meeting. I don't know what your government structure is, but we have 2 meetings a month. And so having at least one meeting coming in, we have a section we call community comment sections, which gives everybody, like for the fire department, the EMS, city clerk, library, and I'm always looking for like library president to step up and give some sort of a report of what's going on. And because I feel like it's important for the decision makers sitting at the table to hear what's going on. So if she's saying, hey, it's getting towards October and we're having trouble keeping the lights on again, it's kind of lets them know this problem hasn't gone away. And yeah, I think that's good. And developing a close relationship with somebody, whether it's your manager, whether it's your mayor, one of the councilmen, if nothing else, somebody, just invite them to come down. If you have to have like a little special meeting of your library board or something like that, so that you're only dealing with one person and one item, so you can get them more comfortable with knowing what you're all about. I think it will be helpful.
So besides financial stuff, if we came and said this was the programs we were doing,
I think it is important to let them know the programs that you're doing, how successful those programs are, because when you start talking about numbers of people through the door, number of internet connections, or however you can quantify some of those things, they're staggering in most instances. People just take it for granted, the kind of activities that go on in a library, and a population that it truly serves a need for them, that may not have the internet connections at home, the kids that are there to be able to complete schoolwork, just all those things. And knowing your city manager, I can see that you probably wouldn't get an email back. But that shouldn't keep you from trying. So if cultivate a relationship with someone else who is more, friendly to the library, or just to making those connections. I guess would be my takeaway to you personally. But I think I just personally have had my eyes open to the services that libraries provide. That if I wasn't in this position, I probably truly wouldn't know.
We don't have a relationship with our city manager, but we do have one with his wife. Sometimes you can go to a spouse and,
The one that's got your ear.
yeah, and then they know, and, yeah.
Remember that horrible report that you guys all have to do, the 18-page long report that you just turn in, and then you put it away because you want to forget, and they have this report that they have to turn into the state library that then goes up to the federal for the IMLS funding. You've got statistics, you have all kinds of statistics in that report that you could send on to your city.
Well, and if you, and I'm going to say manipulate the spreadsheet, because that's how you do it, you're not manipulating the statistics, but you can also compare your awesomeness to libraries of a similar size, and your city needs to hear how fantastic you are. It's important.
how much we do with how little.
How
we
much
do.
less.
Exactly.
And that's a key thing. You've got the information there. So, like one of the things that we've started collecting is wireless connectivity. And so just that alone probably will open up the eyes of the city or county or whoever your governing body is. So one of the things that I was told many years ago was that when it comes to presenting the budget, it's better to have one of the library board members go rather than the director, because the director has a vested interest in the budget because it pays his or her salary. So who is it that you want to hear from? Do you want to hear just from the trustees? Do you want to hear from library patrons? Occasionally, we find that kids want to present things that they've done in the library that they're specifically proud of. Who is it that is best to deliver the library's message to you?
Well, here again, it's going to be interesting because for the last, up until January of this year, prior 20 years, the city's budgeting has been done by one city councilman and a city clerk. They put the budget all together, they present the budget at the budget hearing. The other three members of the council, gosh, this is a big thing, it's fine print, they don't know what what's good to me, come on, let's vote on it. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. And so they've governed by the use of the word no. No, well, no is an easy thing. That's the easiest thing in the world to get out of doing anything. But no can only run you so long before you've used up everything. You burn up all the fat, there's nothing left. In our particular cities, since we've been lucky in that by not fixing anything, not spending anything, not doing anything, and keeping it kind of all under wraps, they have managed to put back a few dollars. But if you've been fixing stuff, it would have been a wash anyway. So it's they can't really pat themselves on the back because now, all these years later, here we are. But in the same process, while that's going on the city level, and this conflict between the city and the library over the darn building, the library is like, this is our budget. The hell with you, you ain't going to hear nothing about it. And so we end up with a situation where, quite frankly, I don't think the city has a clue. I know my city council, or the prior city council, had no clue what the library's budget was. I mean, other than they come and say, hey, we're out of money by mid-October. And the only reason I know it is because I've been on the library board before, and I am involved with them, and I can take it back to the new council and kind of impress upon them that we need to do something different. And I think we are going to get something different done going forward. But yeah, it's a difficult thing, and I'm hopeful that none of the rest of you are in that kind of situation. And if you think you're even getting close to it, gosh sake, stop and get some cooler heads to prevail, because if it goes off the rails, I'm telling you, it's a tough one.
So does it help to have library patrons talk to the city council about what they like or dislike about what the library is doing?
I think probably yes, like I say, we're only a town of like 420 people, so everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody's business, and everybody's talking about this or that. And so there's a lot of give and take in that regard. And I think most of the council members that want to know, they'll find out. I mean, it's pretty easy to find out what's going on down there. And I think with the council that I have now, share more of my belief in that because of the financial, I don't know, the demographic of the city being such that it is, I kind of feel like if our library makes a difference in like one kid's life, it makes the difference.
Mm-hmm. I want to clap for you.
I guess I have a little bit of a different perspective on this. I kind of believe in the chain of command, and so I like to hear from the director, because I view the library as kind of set up like a city. Their board is there to set policies, and they hire a director to make sure those are carried out and to run the library. It's very similar to the city. But a city council, their job is truly to make policy, and they hire me, professional manager, to run the day-to-day business. So, I like to hear from the director. I don't really want to hear from their board to come talk about the budget. You've got somebody that you hired a professional that's supposed to understand the budget and the inner workings of library and the laws, and they're going to know it much more detail than someone that's sitting on the board. So, but as far as hearing from patrons, that's always powerful, and kids, it's hard to say no to kids, when they're requesting stuff. So that makes an impact on kind of a personal level, and it may push someone to action a little bit more if you're you know, like Representative Johnson said, if you're getting 1,000 emails, you're, enough's enough, we'll figure out something, we'll figure out a way to do it. So you can inundate them in that way, but, you know, just me personally, when they're presenting, I want to hear from them. I want to hear from the director.
So that's a little bit of a difference between a larger community and a smaller community. So I think,
Absolutely.
and you know, because a lot of the smaller communities, like Florence, they have a city clerk who probably doesn't have a lot of professional training in, really my guess, in how to run the city. And so a lot of times it's a local person who has a heart for community service, who takes on that job, and they may or may not have much training.
I think it can just be a difference in personalities too. Someone sitting in my same position, they have completely different attitude, and I think that's where it's important that you form a relationship and you'll start understanding, you know, how they prefer things are done.
And then, I guess, like you said, the give and the take between the bigger system, smaller system, we're definitely the other end of the spectrum here. Here again, like I said, at 13 hours a week and what, $7.50 an hour, whatever it is, $7.75, you're getting somebody that can come in there and keep the place operating, keep the kids from tearing stuff up, you know, keep the place going. But you're not going to hire somebody at that level that's going to know anything about budgeting or be able to really effectively communicate that. So, because we're under a mayor council form of government where I'm at, I'm the guy that manages the day-to-day operations, so I need to hear more out of the president of the board. You know, hearing from the whole board, you know, by sitting in on meetings, hearing the discussions, how they come to decisions is helpful. But when it comes down to reporting and budgeting and stuff like this, is what they come up with. I think I'd rather hear out of Susan probably, because, you know, she can kind of be a spokesman for them, and they put the effort into it, and they probably know more about it than what Mary Jane or librarian would know.
What about when you get to the state level?
So similar, the directors and trustees are who I would want to catch. If you have a hearing, then I think the patrons and the children can be useful to that point. But it is, wherever we are, time is always limited and information is always incomplete. So what is the most robust way to get the most complete information? I feel that comes from the directors and trustees.
And adding on to that, what is most effective? We talked a little bit about email. You asked this question before. Library newsletters, a lot of libraries do newsletters. What is the most effective way for people to contact you? The telephone, your email? How do you like to be contacted?
So all of the above, and email is probably the most general one. You have the record, you have the information that's complete. The newsletter is the most likely to get lost in the shuffle if there's a crunch on time. Don't necessarily think that your message isn't getting through from repeated emails. Sometimes it's not. It's really nice to have feedback to know, but sometimes the emails do make it through. As you get to that crunch where I've got to get this information through, and I don't know if it's getting through, that's where this is Colleen had mentioned what is that other relationship that you can get to? Who does that person have the texting relationship with that if they send a message, it's going to get through? So like for me, generally, if you've got no idea, I have a relationship with my county commissioners in most places where I'm texting. Interestingly enough, the only one I know is Saliina, right? But how do I find somebody that can get there, and how do I cultivate that relationship through one or two other people? Ideally, one other person that I can get to that can say, wait, gosh, you got to call back and find out what's going on with this bill in this committee. I talked to your assistant twice and you haven't called me back, so who's going to get through? And anyway, so that eventually that face-to-face, ear-to-ear thing is necessary on the big issues.
When you get emails, what's going to make you read it quicker? From my experience, if you're in the subject line, if you're just like a library bill, but if you're from his hometown or you're from his district, because he's getting emails from, statewide, something that's got, I would put something in there that's going to catch his eye, that, it's this, but, something that lets him know that this is his district and it affects him directly, because I don't get near the emails he does, but I skim when I'm in, crunch for time. So I'd encourage you to find something and have that relationship. When you're up there talking to them, ask them, if I send you an email, what's most likely to catch your attention that it's probably going to get read?
And with the representative, I think when the session is in, one of the best relationships that you can cultivate is with their administrative assistants, because they kind of are the gatekeeper. For some of the representatives, the administrative assistant sets the appointments and everything.
So get 10 minutes say I need 10 minutes.
Yes.
And get that worked into the calendar to have that call or face-to-face visit. That's absolutely the right way.
Or when they come back, you all have copies, they come back and make sure you're attending those things when they're not in session.
Or even offer to host one. If there's not any happening, we'll say, hey, why don't we see if we can use it really?
For me, it's email. Email, text, I like all forms of communication, but email gives me a little bit of a paper trail because I do have a lot to be mindful of, and so I can, especially if I need to set a calendar appointment or something, I can do that just off my phone or off the email that's still sitting there. But it gives me a little bit of a paper trail, lets me know that I did follow up with you, and it also helps jog my memory when you call me, a month from now and say, do you remember that email, or do you remember we talked about this? And so, and some of it depends on the urgency of the communication. If you're in my building and you got water pouring down on your head because there's a giant leak, you better go pick up the phone and call my cell phone. or a text to say, SOS, something like that.
When it comes to a little town, I'm on the streets every day. I work on the water department, I work in all the different departments, fixing stuff all over the place, so I'm easily accessible. Email is fine, but here again, I've got other interests besides being just mayor, so I get a lot of emails anyway, and I think they make good points, having something in that subject line to catch your attention. Like you said, water leak, there's something that's it's important to you to get it across, to get it in the subject line, so it'll jump out there. But if you're in little small communities and things, like I say, keep an eye out for your administrator, your mayor, whoever your contact person is, and I don't think it ever hurts to wave at them, to stop them on the street, just kind of give them a little update, keep friendly. That's the, because believe me, as mayor of a small community, you're getting beat up all the time. Seeing a friendly face is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful break.
I had trouble communicating with the mayor, and nothing I was doing was getting through, and so I visited with the interim city manager, and they said, yeah, don't email, he won't ever answer, you gotta call him, or go past work and see him, and boom, there we were, that was all they needed.
Well, everybody's always text messaging me. I use a flip phone. My wife trying to get me to get a smartphone. I don't want the time to have to deal with all that, so it's, stop me on the street or give me a call.
I once had a mayor tell me that the library board meeting was his guaranteed happy meeting of the month. because all the others were always they were always grim, and yet he was guaranteed to go in there and he would hear, we had this many kids at story time, and that's a happy thing, and so be sure that those board meetings, and libraries do wind up with hard issues as well, but I think that communication, you have to better that. So, thinking about your respective roles, what shortcomings do you see in how library directors and boards interact with you, and what suggestions do you have for improving communication and strengthening these relationships? We'll talk a little bit about that. Kind of think about, and we might not want to talk about Gail, but
You want to talk about Gail?
Sure. But think about in where you've been. When things happen, when communication hasn't gone smoothly, and how we can try and avoid those pitfalls.
You know, I thought about this and was trying to come up with, a suggestion, and I don't have one off the top of my head. So I want to take one moment and go the opposite direction and just commend you for the work you have done. We talked a little about the bill earlier that had come up in 16, and I couldn't remember what the bill did. But after we talked about it for a bit, I remember that the general sense through the Capitol was, don't mess with the librarians. And it wasn't necessarily a negative. It was just they've got the issues together, and it was the communication that said, you don't want to go there. And then to the personal piece, it is a happy meeting when you all come through the office. So thanks for doing that, and scheduling time with the administrative assistants and doing that. And the touch lasts. It's not only that, but the way you think about it. I know, so don't look now because it's not with me, but in the bottom left corner of my desk drawer, there's a thing where I can shine my shoes, right?
Yes.
And if I feel a headache coming on, I'm going to get one of those little packets, and everything is right there in that bag that I got at the beginning of the session from the librarians, and at least some of it will be depleted by the end. So those are the two key items that I appreciate out of that bag and use annually.
Good to know.
And you don't have to do a lot. You really don't. But a couple of those little touches are really good. I actually feel guilty. There's such a nice set of things that are there. I don't want to take too much away. But I do appreciate I appreciate I forget if it's I forget what it is, but I appreciate those two items a lot.
Do you all know what he's talking about?
It sounds like a bribe.
So the last couple of years, we've given them kind of care packages, goodie bags that have like snacks, because one of the things that we've heard is that sometimes when they're in there, they can't get out to get something to eat, so they have a little snack. We put in Tylenol, Tums,
Alka-Seltzer and Advil.
sometimes no-dose, Tylenol, and various other little things, and we make little bags. Well, last year when we stood outside the chamber, and we were handing out the bags as they came in, and a few people had come down the back stairs, but as soon as they all saw you all that went through there come in with your bags,
They came back.
They came
and
back.
they all came out, they're going, where's our bag? So yeah, they are something that, and this is, I mean, it's a little, I mean, we don't give you anything that's of real value because we know you can't accept that. But just that idea
It's
of,
that touch.
we want to let you know that we do care about the job that you guys do.
Kendall, do you need a bag?
That's where the,
Well, that's all a good idea.
We'll get you one right away.
So yeah, it wouldn't hurt to give the city council a little care package of, we know that this job is taxing, it's hard, and we appreciate you, and here's just a few little things for you to keep in your desk at your, at your place. And sometimes it's those little things that make and also we felt like it gave us a chance to look at our representatives and shake their hand and put some, give them something.
And if everybody did it, that wouldn't work. But I think it's one of the things that demonstrates that your communication actually is better than what most groups would have.
And I think I mentioned this to you when we were together in April, about that 2016 meeting where we packed the hearing room. Were you in that hearing?
No, I wish I would have known what you remember.
And we brought, but the people that came with us were like the farmers union came with us, and some of the teachers came with us, and we had a group come out from Weston.
Yeah, and it was very funny because our cohort from Weston had their representative there, and he was the only representative who wasn't on the committee who was in that room. And that was Mr. Billinger.
Oh, gotcha.
Before he was in the Senate.
Yeah.
So we made a splash.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was,
We have a pretty good phone network when it comes to communication. For, among ourselves, but now how does that translate up to get this, you know?
Right. In that instance, that pair from Weston, when I sent out the call for action on that, she asked, well, what can we do? And I said, well, these are the things that need done. And she said, well, I don't think I can do any of those things, but I can be a body. And I think sometimes we think that we can't do anything, but having a phone call, being able to write a quick email, please don't do this, this would hurt us, and letting that be enough in the like, you don't have to explain why, because other people are explaining why. But just having that point of order on there and just say, I'm a body, I matter.
And to take that a step further, if I start getting a set of emails that all have the same subject,
Right.
it has an
Yes.
impact, has a bigger impact if I know who it's from. But if I get just a little change to that email so that I know it didn't come from a forwarded thing,
Right.
that has a bigger impact. So by the 20-something one, by the 100th one, I've asked my assistant to just sort those out, right? So changing it up a little is helpful.
I guess some of the things that I talked, well, of course, we talked a little bit about frequency of communication and make sure you have that right blend or right feel for the frequency of the communication you have. I'd encourage you, don't just talk to you when you need something. I think that happens all too often. If you're just coming with your hand out, or we get that feeling that that's really all you really care about, then that's probably not. I would encourage you to think about that. But as far as improving communication, strengthening that relationship, stay engaged. Attend some of the council meetings, even if you're not saying anything there to speak. Attend so you have an understanding of what's going on, or visit with your council members. I'd look for ways to partner with the organization. You talked about maybe you'd host a coffee. Well, maybe you have the capabilities of hosting the council meeting, and something like that. And so bring the governing body to your facility, so that maybe the only time they get in there, quite honestly.
We're busy.
Pardon me?
Council coffee.
Council coffee, yeah, any of those types of things that that you could do. I host a city administrator's coffee, and I'm always looking for those types of venues, so do something like that. Just figure out a way that you can partner with the city or your governing organization.
I think one of the things that is important is to realize that they want the same thing for the community that you do, and you're not adversaries, and everything is going to work better for everybody else if you work together and you partner together. Kendall and I have worked through some really hard stuff his second or third day on the job, and one of the conversations was, we have the same goals, and that really made it so that we're on the same team.
The only thing I could add to what they've said was, in my experience, and the last 4 or 5 months, we've been going through some really, really serious issues at the city level, not associated with the library. But so I think it's helpful, and I suspect this probably all the way up the chain to the top, but council, on smaller communities and stuff, you got council members, a lot of times these aren't professional politicians, they're not professional problem solvers and stuff like this. And so when you bring problems to a council or to your mayor or to your city administrators or other folks, you probably know, you're intimately involved with your problem. You know what your problem is. You're probably more of an expert on that problem than the guy that you're trying to get to make the decision to help you fix the problem. And so thinking through that problem really well, defining it, and coming up with some possible solutions, even if you don't know what they might be, but just some ideas, I find have been very, very helpful, because I've had different groups come to with different problems. They know what they want it done their way, and they want it done right now. Well, it just can't work that way. And as opposed to, say, another group comes in and they've got a problem, and we've been working on it for 6 months, and we've raised this much money through fundraisers and stuff, but we're still short half the money, and we can probably come up with a little bit more, with a few more fundraisers. And so they're working on solutions to the problem, and we're just asking for some help. Well, then it makes it easier for these council members to think, okay, well, yeah, that kind of makes some sense. And so then they start looking, they start talking, and you may not get an answer that night, but they're thinking about it. They're trying to figure out ways of doing it. I guess to throw a bone back to the old council that I had some problems with, there was 2 of the gentlemen on that have retired, are very well heeled, pretty financially well off. So if they could see that, hey, there is a significant problem, there's not a solution that the city can really come up with, oftentimes they would reach in their pocket, they would cut a check, they come up with some other creative way of, here, don't say nothing, here, take this and make it go away, and so sometimes that's pretty helpful to, or I find it's been very helpful to not just bring the problem, but try to bring some solutions to the table too. It sort of shows that you've thought it through and you're trying, and that's real helpful.
So the last question that we have on here, the Attorney General has told us that the mayor counts in the quorum. So if we have a city library with a board of 7 plus the mayor, they have to have 5 people to make a quorum there. We have a township library, and their board is 5. The township chair counts as part of the quorum, so they have to have 4 people always present at those meetings. What do you do when you've got the head of the municipality not wanting to come to the meeting? How do we fix that? Because now we've been told that they count as that quorum. If they're not there, they count against it. Either one of you have any?
Well, I'll take that one. It's pretty easy for me because it's built into our ordinances. They wrote it into our ordinance years ago that the mayor is supposed to show up at every library meeting. Now, I'm the first mayor that's come along and recorded history that's gone to the meetings. Evidently, nobody's ever read the ordinance book on that since that was done. But how to get them to come, I guess try to make it as inviting as you can to them. I mean, I don't know what you're going to do. It's just going to be every individual. And I don't have an answer for that because there's going to be some people that they're either too busy, they're not, tug at their heartstrings, like somebody said earlier. Find the wife or the husband or something like this and get them involved. And don't guilt them into it. At some point.
And I think on that, if you just explain to that person that Attorney General says they count in the quorum, so not showing up makes it even harder for us to be able to do business. And can you let them know that in addition to their expertise, their support, their communication, we're actually hindered by their lack of involvement to help guilt them into it.
And do check your ordinances. You may find something in there that says the mayor's supposed to be showing up. And he's supposed to be enforcing the rules and the laws of the city. The ordinances and the laws of the city. So,
some of it probably is ignorance on their part. They may not realize I'm running for mayor to run the city. I didn't know I was going to have to do this or I was going to to do this. So, you know, when we're coming up in elections, that's a good time to make that reminder. You know, if you have the ability to do so, find out what their expectations are. But I think probably, as I was thinking through this, I know what makes me want to go to meetings. I could go to a meeting every night of my life if I truly wanted to. But, you know, some of those are an expectation of the position. I understand that. But no one here wants to go to a poorly run meeting. And so make certain that your meetings are well run. Have an agenda, stick to it. You know, we all know the person that, you know, they get on their soapbox or, you know, that drags everything out. You know, try to limit those things. So the president of your board, you know, give them some training. Provide them the training on how to run a meeting well and let them know what their expectations are. So it's not just for the mayor, but it's for all involved. So you get in, get your business done, and get out. You know, you want a high return on your time. Everybody does. And so anything that you can do to make those better, more well run, it's gonna be better for everyone. I would ask them to seek out their opinions, whatever expertise that they might have that might lend itself to what you're trying to accomplish. Everybody wants to feel like they're, you know, they have, you know, something to contribute. So try to figure out maybe what your mayor's expertise level is or ways that they could really contribute. Ask them to report back, be the liaison to the council. So, you know, if they don't have anything to report to the council, either nothing happened or they weren't there. So, you know, that's a little bit of a guilt factor, and a little bit. But are you inviting them? That's the other thing. Invite them every time, and I would do it publicly. If you had a chance to be speaking at the council meeting or something like that, you know, hey, you know, Mayor, remember, don't forget our board meetings, you know, second Tuesdays, you know, something like that. You know, so, what are they going to do? I mean, you embarrass them a little bit, but maybe, you know, maybe it isn't a terrible thing. I wouldn't try to offend them. But you know, they're human like everybody else.
Carol? You guys have an agenda. You guys have your own agenda. You're trying to promote your being mayor in your city and your state. And so you have an agenda also. And so for you to be invited in for our libraries and have that opportunity to speak is a great opportunity. It's win-win.
Yeah.
For the community and for your agenda, for both of our agendas.
And I would add, if your mayor's not able to come, look at when your meeting is, what day, what time.
That's good.
You may need to change your bylaws as we do in Great Bend because the mayor is otherwise occupied then. And so, you know, that may be something that every time there's a new mayor, don't hesitate to do that.
And Abilene just said the same thing, that their meetings fall on the same time as when the city council meetings, so they're gonna have to look at changing that.
Right.
The date of their meeting, so, yeah, I think that's, the bylaws are really not carved in stone. You can move, you wanna have a regular meeting, you don't wanna have to move it around constantly, but having that regular meeting at a time that doesn't conflict with the city council meeting, I think is really important.
Is that a recent, you said that the attorney, how recent is that? Because our city attorney is telling her it's conflict of interest, so I was
It's in state statute, so
It's not a conflict.
I can.
Well, I know it isn't, I just, you know.
And it's been in statute since the 60s, but it's
Well,
the attorney
that's what I
general.
want to know. How old is it? Maybe
12,
statute
12,
books.
20, first paragraph, at the end.
The AG opinion just addressed the issue of what
Quorum.
the definition of quorum and what does ex officio mean.
The legislation, 12, 12, 20, so it says that the head of the municipality is an ex officio member of the board with all the rights and responsibilities thereof. And so, you guys know that I do this library law.
She'd been attending, he just,
Okay, so
not to, this
an
is
ex
prior to
officio,
me.
but with voting privilege.
Yes, full
Full, rights and responsibilities. So, by statute, the mayor is included. What we've just been told, and this, I want to say was 15, was that one? I've got the letter in my library law packet. But, we got an opinion that says that they do count as a quorum.
That was it.
And I can see where your attorney might think that is a conflict of interest because the mayor does appoint new library board members, but those library board members also need to be approved by council.
That's interesting. Because it hasn't happened that way in Florence in probably 100 years.
Well, I don't mean to stir up more trouble for you.
No, believe me.
But I will remind you though, that an AG opinion is worth the
yes,
paper
it
it's
is.
written on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Honestly, but that's good, something to stand on.
So that brings to mind a question that while you were talking earlier, you know, we as systems, we spend a lot of time training our library boards to the law of what is their role. Is there not something set up so the municipalities can learn what their jobs are? Because that is just kind of, the mayors don't know that they're members of library boards and they try to send representatives sometimes or proxies and think that their proxies can vote in their stead or that it doesn't matter if they come or any, you know, just little things like that. Is there just not anything?
There is.
That's why I think it's, go ahead.
But you gotta get them to attend those as well.
Oh,
I think that's why it's important to have this, develop the connection between your board or your library and your mayor or whatever. Because at some point he's gonna quit running for office or he's gonna get out of office, somebody else is gonna be elected. You need to have that connection in place with the office and then continue educating because a lot of these, I don't know about bigger towns. I mean, I've never run for mayor in a bigger town. Just a small one, I question my sanity on that one. But anyway, it's, there's not so far I haven't found one. There's not like a mayor's, you know, dummy's book to being a mayor or something like this. So, you know, you're learning a lot of it by the seat of your pants and by looking up the statutes, reading it, doing the best interpretation you can of it. And you start digging into that and there's volumes and volumes of it, and it's confusing. And it takes you quite a little while before you kind of get a handle on it. But and then about the time you think you can understand it, well, then something changes. Or you find another whole section that seems to contradict everything that you thought you learned. But yeah, I think it's really important to develop that relationship and educate, especially the new ones coming in, because they may not know. I suspect they're in Florence because they just didn't know. They just didn't know they were supposed to show up. We have a housing authority there, and that's part of the mayor's supposed to be going to that too. The mayor's supposed to be appointing the board members to that one. Man, they've been appointing their own forever. Same with the library's been doing it forever. Well, this seems to work, so I know different. I should be doing that, but I don't. You know, I figure there's no reason. That seems to be working, so don't mess with it. There's lots of other things that's broke. But legally, technically, I'm supposed to be doing all that.
But I think also, even knowing that, I think as librarians and library directors, one of the worst things we can do is come out holding the law and say, well, it says here. That's not going to go very far at all to build that relationship. And relationship building takes time.
I guess I'd be curious when you said it's the head of the city that, of municipality, that could change a little bit depending on what type of government. If you're a mayor or your council administrator form, then you have a mayor that's elected solely. But if you're in a counselor manager form, there are no differentiations in the authority of a council member. But typically they elect a mayor among themselves to run the meetings. So.
And that's they usually rotate that position among the council.
Yeah, and it's an annual rotation, and you know, I might argue in that case, the city manager is really the head of the government. You know, so I would I would wonder an opinion on that. You know, so, the mayor, a lot of times, is just a figurehead with no more authority than any other
Comes in the form of government, and that's the way it was in Florence, because we're under a mayor council form of government. When I came in office to begin with, it was like, well, you just sit there, you just look pretty, and you just handle the meetings and sign the checks, and everything's fine. Well, then I ran into a problem with the water department, and I found out that, oh, wait a minute, it's not necessarily the case. It's absolutely not the case. If something goes wrong, somebody gets sick, somebody dies because of a water problem, under a mayor council form of government, council members have plausible deniability. They have no power outside of a council meeting. We don't have an administrator, so who's in charge? Well, the guy who gets to go to jail is the mayor. It's like, oh, really? Well, yeah, now I'm going to start paying a lot more attention. But there is, like he says, there's distinctions between the different forms of government, and I would agree with him. If it's under his form of government, it probably is important that he'd probably be the guy you would want to have at your board meetings.
I told Ron Fair that he doesn't want another meeting on that.
I'm sure he doesn't.
He sent whoever's mayor in Manhattan comes to the,
Well,
for their year. For their year.
I'm sure she'd be very good. She probably enjoys it.
Yeah, and we've had all kinds of that. But, and typically speaking, what I know of that form, they just, whoever is the mayor for that year, because it usually rotates annually on those.
Just want to make a mention, we have library boards that are in relationship with federal governments, but the government still does not want to go forward with that, because we were having difficulties getting quorums to begin with. And they don't want to hinder that, so they said, when they'll show up, but otherwise go to your lower quorum. And I know at least one of them, that the county attorney backed that up, and even the auditor said that's fine. It's local governance. So they said to say, go ahead and enforce into the business. Now, that's recently changed, and the ex officios started coming, but, so what do you do when you have a governance that's willing to use your own local authority?
Well, I think they used to abuse home rule.
And that's one of those things where
Because they're not the library to operate.
it would probably work out to the point that if there was some issue that was controversial in the municipality, and the lower quorum voted one way or the other on that, and someone in the community took exception, and then they said, well, you couldn't really do that because of the quorum issue, then it depends on whether the Attorney General wants to push forward what the opinion that they gave, and you're just, and like Bob was saying, the library board has been doing their own appointments, and that happens, and there are a lot of cities that are just like, don't even ask me because I don't want to know. It works until you get caught at it, and that's the thing. And you can operate on that principle of it's better to ask forgiveness and permission, but if you get caught at it in this, it could be costly. And so we try. I always tell the boards that my job is to try and keep them from getting into trouble.
And to be as transparent as possible, especially with your city government. Right.
But it's also, if you can't meet that quorum to operate, then your auditors are starting to say, you have to do something. You have to operate. You can't go several months without that.
Well, and that's when you have in the bylaws that if someone hasn't attended in X number of months, they're removed from office, and the mayor gets to appoint somebody else.
Well, it sounds like we want the mayor to attend, but the most important is how does it operate? I mean, we don't want folks getting in trouble trying to operate, so do we need a clarification or change to the statute? That would be the question that I'd have.
You can't fire someone from the board, so how does that work if they've missed so many meetings?
Well, it's in the bylaws. If your bylaws say.
But if they're not coming, how do you amend the bylaws?
You have to have a quorum to pass the bylaws, it's true.
That one time.
But if you have a thing in the bylaws about attendance, then you can remove somebody for non-attendance.
Okay.
You basically ask for the resignation. If you have, if you have a truly grievous problem with a board member, I have language that we wrote for a community, because there is no language in the statutes for removal of a board member.
Okay, that's what she just
They
said.
did a home rule charter, that ordinance that allows the mayor to remove a person from any board that they appoint.
Wow.
Because we had to get somebody was having a nervous breakdown and was really like impacting the whole city. Because as in standing up in church and berating the preacher for their sermon, and among other things. And I went to the board meeting, and the secretary was sitting there like this, taking the minutes, trying to protect his head from, and so the mayor said, how do we do this? And so that's what we did.
And I always say when we're doing board training is, that's probably a problem that you inherited, that you've got a trustee that doesn't come, and that's why that trustee recruitment packet that I use, I shared, other people have other things, is so important so that they know what the expectations are for that before they ever go to the mayor. I think they should.
I'm going to be taking. I asked a board member if she wanted to continue. I know I'm probably not supposed to, but she never came to meetings. And we had people wanting to be on the board.
You can ask.
You can ask.
You can ask.
And sometimes it's, there are things that have happened in that person's life. Maybe there's an illness or a family illness or something that's going on, and they feel they don't want to let people down because they know that it's important to have people on the board, and yet they can't make the meetings. And so sometimes it's a relief to them if you say.
She said, that's a relief that you're asking. I said, we really enjoy you, but we need to be able to make decisions. So it worked out well.
Good management on your part.
Yeah.
Thank you. One time.
No.
Other questions for these guys? Thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Thank you.
We get a little bit more of a break because we need to be back in